Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most important and controversial topics in global politics right now, the latest developments between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. With a high-stakes war still raging in Ukraine, a historic U.S. Russia summit just wrapped up in Alaska, and whispers of back-channel deals, the world is watching closely. Some see hope for peace, while others worry about democracy being undermined. So let's break it all down. For years, the relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin has been a subject of debate. Critics argue Trump has always been too cozy with the Russian leader, while supporters say his approach could lead to deals and stability. Fast forward to 2025, and the Russia-Ukraine war remains one of the biggest crises of our time. Millions have been displaced, tens of thousands killed, and global food and energy markets shaken. Into this chaos steps Trump, again, this time not as a candidate, but as a sitting U.S. president trying to position himself as the man who can end the war. Earlier this month, Trump and Putin met in Alaska for the first in-person meeting since the invasion of Ukraine. It was historic, the first Russian presidential visit to U.S. soil in a decade, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The meeting in Alaska was billed as a chance to cool tensions, explore possible ceasefire options, and discuss Ukraine's security future. Trump described the talks as constructive, while Putin called them serious and businesslike. But despite the optimistic words, no ceasefire deal was reached. Instead, Trump pivoted the focus. He insisted that the next move rests with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. In his words, any progress depends on Ukraine showing flexibility. That statement raised eyebrows, especially in Europe, where leaders worry that Trump may be pressuring Ukraine to make concessions while Putin gives little in return. One key takeaway was Trump's vision for security guarantees in a post-war Ukraine. He suggested that the U.S. could provide air support or intelligence assistance, but that Europe should take the lead when it comes to ground forces. In other words, America might play more of a supporting role while expecting NATO allies to carry the heavier burden. So, where does Putin stand in all of this? According to Trump, Putin is tired of war and might be open to a deal. But Trump also admitted that it's possible Putin simply doesn't want to negotiate in good faith. Analysts point out that while Russia's economy has been battered by sanctions and the war has dragged on longer than expected, Putin still holds significant leverage in occupied territories. For many observers, the big question is whether Putin sees Trump as a partner who can deliver concessions, like reduced Western military support for Ukraine, in exchange for vague promises of peace. That's why Trump's rhetoric matters so much. When he talks about flexibility and shifting responsibility onto Ukraine, it sounds to some like he's tilting in Moscow's direction. Adding fuel to the fire was a hot mic moment that went viral after the summit. Trump was overheard saying, "Putin wants to make a deal for me. He loves me." Critics jumped on this immediately, calling it proof of Trump's overly close relationship with Putin. Supporters brushed it off as Trump being Trump, boastful, unscripted, and always eager to claim he's the center of attention. But whether intentional or not, that moment reinforced the narrative that Putin might prefer dealing with Trump rather than other Western leaders. And for Ukraine and its allies, that's a worrisome signal. Looking ahead, Trump has floated the idea of bringing Putin and Zelenskyy together for direct talks, potentially followed by a three-way summit with himself as mediator. This would be an unprecedented step, and Trump has framed it as his personal mission to end the war. But there's a catch. Russia hasn't confirmed its willingness to participate, and Ukraine is deeply cautious. Zelenskyy has consistently said that peace cannot come at the cost of Ukraine's sovereignty or territorial integrity. Any deal that forces Ukraine to give up land would be politically toxic, not just in Kyiv, but across Europe. Meanwhile, European leaders are watching all this with mixed feelings. On one hand, they welcome any effort to reduce violence and stabilize the region. On the other, they fear that Trump's style of deal-making could undercut Ukraine's negotiating position. If the U.S. leans too heavily toward Moscow, Europe may feel compelled to step up its own military and financial support for Kyiv. Behind the scenes, NATO officials are already preparing contingency plans in case Washington softens its commitments. That could mean more European troops stationed on the eastern flank, more arms flowing to Ukraine, and a more divided transatlantic alliance. For Americans, the stakes are enormous. On the surface, Trump's message is simple. He wants to end the war, save U.S. taxpayers' money, and reduce the risk of American troops being dragged into a long conflict. That resonates with a lot of voters. But critics argue that peace at any cost isn't real peace. It's appeasement. If Russia is allowed to keep large parts of Ukraine, it could embolden Putin to push further, whether in Eastern Europe or through hybrid tactics like cyber attacks and election interference. In that sense, how Trump handles this could shape not just Ukraine's future, but the entire global order. So what comes next? Trump is pushing for a direct Putin-Zelenskyy meeting, possibly within the next few months. Negotiators are exploring possible formats for security guarantees, with options ranging from NATO-style commitments to looser reassurance forces stationed in Europe. At the same time, the war continues. Fighting in eastern Ukraine hasn't stopped, and every day without a ceasefire means more lives lost. For ordinary Ukrainians, the political chess game happening in Alaska or Washington feels painfully distant compared to the reality on the ground. To sum it up, Trump and Putin's Alaska summit was historic, but produced no breakthrough. Trump suggests Putin might be tired of war, but it's unclear if that's true. A hot mic moment showed Trump bragging about Putin's admiration, sparking controversy. A possible trilateral summit with Ukraine is on the horizon, but fraught with risks. Europe is cautious, worried that Trump's strategy could weaken Ukraine's hand. Whether you see Trump as a bold negotiator who can make peace or a risky player giving Putin too much leverage, one thing is clear. The world is entering a new, uncertain phase of diplomacy. And that's why this story matters, not just for Ukraine, not just for Europe, but for all of us. Because how America handles this moment could shape the future of democracy and security worldwide. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Trump can really broker peace with Putin? Or is this just another chapter in a long, complicated rivalry? Stay tuned, because this story is far from over.